Before we went on this evening, Ken said, how did you get to be so lucky to go last? And I said, are you crazy? You all want to go home soon, but there's an offering, and you can't go until there's an offering. In 1976, after graduating from high school in St. Catharines, Ontario, I was ready to go to university, and I had been accepted at Wilfrid Laurier in Waterloo, and I even had a scholarship to go there. So I thought my direction was set for the next 3 years. At least that's what I thought. But then one summer day, a new friend told me he was planning to go to a place called Mennonite Brethren Bible College in Winnipeg. And he needed a roommate. Was I interested? I had never heard of Mennonite Brethren Bible College before, but I said yes on the spot. And the rest is history. I was only going to go for 1 year, mind you. Then I was going to get back on my educational track back in Ontario, but 1 year turned into 2 and 2 into 3, and before I knew it, I was graduating from MBBC in 1979 and the University of Winnipeg a year later in 1980. And on such a spontaneous decision, one might even say impudent and foolhardy, a life was made, but I haven't regretted it, not for a moment. Because I grew in so many ways at MBBC, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And I gained so many friendships that have lasted a lifetime. And it was also there that I discovered what I wanted to do, what I was called to do, writing, communicating, and telling stories. But before I could discover what I wanted to do and what I was called to do, I first had to discover what I shouldn't be doing. And that was to be a pastor. Because after my first year at college, I thought I was being called to the pastorate. So I did a practicum, an internship at Killarney Park Mennonite Brethren Church in Vancouver in the summer of 1977. And God bless those people. They put up with me for a summer. They even said many kind things when I left. But at the end of my practicum, I knew that pastoring wasn't for me because it just wasn't a good fit. So I like to tell people that my practicum worked out exactly as it was designed to because it showed me what I should not do with my life. And so a year later, in the spring of 1978, I found then what I wanted to do and what I was being called to do. And that's when I walked into the office of Harold Jantz, who was editor of the Mennonite Brethren Herald, and said I wanted a job. And it was a brash move because I had no experience. I had no clue about writing, reporting, and editing, and Harold should have thrown me out, but he didn't. He said yes, and he gave me a summer job, and as you've heard before from other people tonight, the rest was history. And since that time, writing, reporting, editing, and telling stories of people in Canada and around the world has been my passion. And along the way, I was lucky enough to find a succession of jobs where I could hone my craft and use my skills. And it's been quite a ride. Over the course of my career, I've been able to travel across Canada and around the world to meet and interview people from many, many walks of life. I've been able to hear stories of incredible pain, but also of great joy. I've seen the aftermath of war and its effects on people, on the land, and on whole communities. I've looked into the eyes of starvation, and I've seen the blank hopelessness that lack of food can produce. But I've also seen hope, lots of it, as women and men in the developing world envision a better life for themselves and their families due to a partnership with people from Canada. And I was also lucky to be in the right place in the right time to influence just a little bit the coverage of faith by media in this country. And that includes organizing the first national conference on faith in the media in Ottawa in 1998. And at the same time, we all have lived through an incredible revolution in communications. This revolution quite literally spans the time from Gutenberg, the printing press and print on paper, to Google, or Guten Google, as I like to call it. Now you should know that it took about 100 years for the effects of the Gutenberg Revolution to work their way through the world of that time. And today, those same changes happen at warp speed. Take the World Wide Web. Because it is so ubiquitous today, it's hard to remember that it's just 26 years old. Now, to put that in perspective, I made my first website in 1994. And at that time, there were fewer than 5,000 websites in the world. Today, there are over 1 billion. Not only that, we have Facebook, we have YouTube, we have the iPhone, all recent inventions that have changed the way we communicate. So the world I started my career in, the world of Gutenberg, one of thriving and growing daily newspapers, magazines, church periodicals, radio, and TV news, is declining rapidly and may soon be gone. In their place is now what's being called content distribution systems. Did you get a content distribution system in your mailbox this morning when the paper arrived? Because even the free press is no longer a newspaper. As editor Paul Simin said earlier this year, it's now a news engine. Said Simin, we are no longer a newspaper, but we publish one. So all this makes it an exciting time and a terrifying time for communicators. On the one hand, communication has never been so easy. And on the other hand, it's never been so terrifying and so hard. So as I near the end of my formal working career, my main goal now is to create space for a new generation of communicators, such as are studying here at CMU, to address the incredible challenges of this time, just as I was given space to address the challenges of my time. But even as things change, some things remain the same. I'm reminded of the words of famed CBS journalist Edward R. Murrow, who observed in the late 1960s, before today's digital revolution, he said, quote, "The newest computer can merely compound, at speed, the oldest problem in the relations between human beings. And in the end, the communicator will still be confronted with the old problem of what to say and how to say it." Let me conclude with a few words from Rudy Wiebe. Rudy was the speaker at my graduation in 1979. At that time, I only knew him as the father of one of my friends and fellow graduates, and since then, he has become a friend. Earlier this year, I asked Rudy if he still had a copy of that speech, and he did. He sent it to me, and I reread it, and I realized that some of his words captured perfectly the essence of my own experience through MBBC, as it was indeed for him. Speaking to our graduating class, Rudy said, quote, "If you had your ears open during the past 3 years and the professors have done their job, then you have heard more than you can consciously live out in a lifetime." End of quote. And yet he went on to say, if we were honest as students, we had already by then, so soon after classes, forgotten everything we had ever heard. But, he said, all those things we had learned and experienced would stay with us. They would be, quote, sunk into the subliminal consciousness, the reservoir of our consciousness, end of quote. And then later in life, when we least expected it, the things we heard in college would come back to us. And when that happened, he said, we would have a feeling that we sort of knew this all along. And yet, he said, we wouldn't quite know how we knew. And I have to say, that has been my experience. I don't remember anything that I heard in most of my classes. Well, that's not true. Some of the jokes that we were told by Vern Ratzlaff, I remember those. But most other things are long gone. But the experience of attending MBBC has shaped my life. It didn't all happen in classes, of course. It also happened in chapel and retreats, in the dining hall, during late-night dorm discussions when we solved all the world's problems, through sports and student council, through friendships, including my life partner, Christine, and also through extracurricular activities such as, and I have to mention this tonight, the University of Elm Creek. Hey, any other graduates? Well, hey, there's one. We actually only graduated a potted plant, so I don't know what I could say about that. But make sure when you go through the bridge, you can find our memorial brick there with our motto in Low German. So ask me if you want more information. Looking back, I'm grateful and humbled by this honor, and I hope that in my life, in some way, I've lived up to the expectations of my professors and my mentors from so long ago.